Hello, I'm Father Robert Spitzer. I appeared on the Larry King Show on Friday night. I just wanted to continue my explication of some of the questions that were asked of me after the show, to fill in some of the details which I was not able to go into during that 1-hour program. Second major question that came up from the audience members was the question about absolute determinism. On page 31 and 32 of the Grand Design, Dr. Hawking and Mlodinow made the contention that human beings were determined, absolutely determined, and that we were merely functioning out of the laws of physics, and that freedom was an illusion. The evidence for this conclusion was that you could stimulate the brain, and this in turn would produce a human behavior. For example, the desire to move my arm or the desire to move my leg. And there's absolutely no doubt about this. If you do stimulate the brain, there surely can be a desire to move the arm or the leg. But does that mean that all human behaviors are reducible merely to physical stimulation of the brain, or merely to molecular activity, which in turn is reducible to physics or the laws of physics? Are all human behaviors reducible to the laws of physics? Did Dr. Hawking and Mlodinow actually prove their point? Well, first we have to look at the logic of that claim to begin with. And of course, you really can't logically do this. It's called a logical fallacy. It moves from a particular to a universal. And the problem is this: because some behaviors, like the desire to move my arm and leg, are clearly stimulated by my brain activity, does that mean that all human behaviors, so we're moving from some behaviors to all behaviors, are therefore reducible to the laws of physics? Listen to that again. Just because some behaviors, the ones we see in the lab stimulated, are reducible to brain stimulation, which in turn is explicable in terms of molecules, which is in turn explicable by the laws of physics, just because some behaviors are explicable, reducible perhaps to the laws of physics, does that mean that all human behaviors are reducible to the laws of physics? Absolutely not. There's not a scintilla of evidence provided by Dr. Mlodinow and Hawking to move from the some to the all. This is called a logical fallacy. Now, what could be the alternatives? Could there be something else besides the laws of physics that could originate, human activities? Well, first we could start off with a very famous study that was done in the Lancet, a prestigious medical journal in London, that talked about a large Dutch study of near-death experiences. So over several years with several hospitals, a whole series of patients were assessed. And after the study of these near-death experiences, it was concluded that there is very reasonable evidence, evidence which is verifiable through a series of different methods, to show that human consciousness may well survive bodily death, material death. So there may be something about human consciousness and human self-consciousness that is not necessarily tied to the human body, to matter, which in turn means that it's not necessarily tied to the laws of physics. Now, let's suppose that this study really is true, and let's suppose that they did the study correctly, so they were able to isolate elements like dream elements, hypnotic states, and all kinds of other things, that they were clear on the gag response, that everything was done very carefully over an 11-year period, and they got to the point where we have at least some evidence which is reasonable to suggest that perhaps there is a dimension to human beings that can survive bodily death and therefore can even survive the laws of physics and can continue to exist independently of the laws of physics. Let's suppose that that activity is already present in a human being. So we have this, I'm going to call it spiritual self-consciousness, the self-consciousness that's capable of surviving bodily death. Let's suppose that it's already part of my body. And let's suppose further that it connects through my brain, and my brain connects to my limbs and so forth and so on. Therefore, that means that there is an open possibility that there is a spiritual origin. In other words, all of my activities may be reducible to what goes through my brain, but everything that connects with my brain may not be reducible to the laws of physics. And whatever it is that connects with my brain, that is this survivability of human self-consciousness after death, if that truly exists, as the evidence seems to suggest from the Lancet study, then being that that's the case, there would be something other than the laws of physics controlling my activities. Perhaps freedom is not an illusion. Perhaps the conclusion that Dr. Hawking and Mlodinow have suggested is really falls so far short of the mark. It really is a rather pitiful kind of substantiation for this grandiose claim. At the end of the day, there appears to be, at the very least, a logical fallacy. At the very most, a complete ignoring of evidence that would suggest some transphysical or transmaterial source of human activity. Even a transphysical and transmaterial source which could connect with the spiritual power, which spiritual power could be the origin for my activities that later manifested itself through my brain, later manifested itself in bodily activities. At the end of the day, the illusion of freedom may be the reality of freedom, and the greater illusion instead may be what Dr. Mlodinow and Dr. Hawking would call the materialism that controls human beings. Thank you.